is the outsourcing of labor and sweatshops, and the solution I pose to this is the use of ethical sourcing as well as enforcing ethical conduct upon the business industry. Now, my first point for this revolves around the export processing zones, or EPZs, and it is known that production chains are currently designed with the intent of maximizing the exploitation of labor, specifically overseas labor. And I believe that production chains should be changed in order to minimize the exploitation of labor, as well as making EPZs accountable for their actions and applying labor laws to them, because they are currently not affected by labor laws and regulations. As well, this will benefit lower rates of overseas labor, meaning lower exploitation rates and lower amounts of child poverty and children being exploited in the workplace. My second point addresses a slightly different vein, looking at income disparity. And statistically proven, the income disparity gap is widening between Canadians, and not just Canadians, but everyone across the world. And the gap is widening and needs to be reduced by cutting down on the outsourcing of labor. For example, in 2011, the top 10% of Canadian earners earned 10 times more than the bottom 10% of Canadian income earners. And decreasing foreign investment and moving to local means of production would also help in this investment, which would mean the lack of transnationalism and cutting down on the use of transnational companies in the production of goods. Finally, I focus on multilateralism, as well as using codes of vendor conduct when addressing issues at the producing level. So, examining the issue at the Gap, where they were dealing with many issues revolving health and workplace safety for their workers, and as a result, they instituted a code of vendor conduct, which basically held it completely accountable for any actions in the future, and they would have to be responsible and criminally responsible for any actions negatively towards their employees. Which leads me to my point on multilateralism, which would be the idea of developing an international organization that deals with sweatshops and outsourcing. And looking at the information provided by Siddharth Kara, an international slavery inspecting force could be potentially enforced to monitor the use of slavery or underpaid and underage workers in the workforce in order to crack down on this on an international scale. Now, a separate issue would be the potential for using social activists to address this cause, such as Mark Kielburger with his Free the Children campaign. And as Kielburger stated, it would take $18 billion to offset world hunger and malnutrition issues. So it's going to take a lot of effort rather than just the efforts of social activists in order to address this problem, but it is a start. For example, a public opinion poll showed that 77% of Canadians want to be known as world leaders in funding solutions to reduce poverty, and 1 billion children, which is 1 in 2, live in poverty, 640 million without adequate shelter, and 400 million without safe water. Therefore, outsourcing is one of those causes of child poverty rates, as well as not having adequate shelter or simple and well-off living conditions. So by changing these issues and affecting these issues, we would be effectively solving a large amount of child poverty on a global scale, which would also focus separately looking back at income disparity, closing the gap between the rich and the poor, which is extremely significant when examining this table here, which shows that people that get by on less than $1 and $2 a day in these specific countries are very poor off. And for the example of Bangladesh, they have an 82.8% rate of people who make less than $2 a day, with Costa Rica coming in at an astonishing 94.5%. Therefore, addressing this issue would not only help to reduce the exploitation of workers at export processing zones, it would also close the gap between the rich and the poor, which is clearly extremely wide at this moment, and also implementing codes of vendor conduct and using multilateralism on an international level to emphasize the issues and work at addressing them in a better manner. So that's all I've got to say for the benefits and potential solution for the most significant challenge of globalization, which I believe is the outsourcing of labor and sweatshops.